It's the Sod Pod, brought to you by Grassland Agro. The Sod Pod.
Hello, and welcome to the Sod Pod. We're on episode 2. Just before we get going, this episode is proudly sponsored by Lister Lynn Fuel and Grocery for all your essential needs. They handed me a free coffee this morning, so that's why they're getting the plug. That's how cheap it is to get the show sponsored, lads.
Imagine.
Just before we get going, we've a new face. For anyone that's watching the video over here, we've Stephen. Stephen, give yourself an intro here.
Thanks, Jim. So I'm a Wicklow man myself. I grew up on a tillage farm along by the coast, only a mile from the sea. So I'll be growing cereals, oilseed rape and beans. I thought I'd always been a fairly progressive farmer, looking for innovative ways to do things. So that led me into the tillage industry then. And last year I was doing a bit of research on biostimulants and cereals, so that naturally led me into starting with Grassland Agro 6 weeks ago. So here I am.
Brilliant. Welcome on board, Stephen. Huge asset, another great asset to the company. Look, let's go straight in. We go two-footed, right? We actually got a query on the back of the last episode there, and it was to do about NMP applications and the importance and impact on grass growth. So I'm going to absolutely curveball John Brennan now. Could you talk about that, John? Peter, you might have to dig him out as well.
Yeah.
And by the end of this, we might have half an explanation.
No better Google.
I'll try anyway. Look, I suppose nitrogen and phosphorus application, whether it's chemical or organic, is a key part of farming, especially this time of year when you're trying to get out your first and second applications. I suppose nitrogen, first of all, is a key nutrient for kickstarting grass growth. I suppose your first round, whether it's mid-February, a bit later, depending on ground conditions, would tend to be a lower kind of rate. Just to try and get something in front of the grass, because grass will respond once it has a certain amount of nutrients in front of it, which is the key. And then as you move into the month of March, where we are now, you can start upping your rates as grass growth takes off, typically around the middle of March. The days get longer, more light going into the ground, places start to dry up, and just ground conditions are more suitable, for an application and then I suppose you're getting your phosphorus into the system then, so phosphorus is kind of your energy source then to stimulate and escalate grass growth. So that will be typically going into your second round, depending on your allowances. You might be going with a compound or whatever your farmer is allowed to use.
I think that's really important. How important in that whole story, Peter, is the nutrient management plan and end of it.
Well, look, I suppose it's everything really now, because the fact we've only, I suppose, a certain amount of nutrients that we can apply. Sometimes I suppose likes of that question, or sometimes we might hear, should we hold them off on the putting out the N early on? But really, the advice there wouldn't be, in that I suppose if you look at the grass coming out of the cold winter, days are short, there's not much light. So I suppose now we start to get the soil temperature rising slightly around that 5-7 degrees, sort of where it's at now. The days are getting longer, it's getting late. The flags are sort of there for to start growing. So we're going in with the N now, and when we say going in with it, it's really a very small amount, because growth it's going to be quite limited.
Yeah.
But the fact it's just about getting some nutrients in there to give it that actual wee kick on. And I suppose tying it back into your NMP allowances overall, unless I suppose you know what they are, I suppose you can't really dictate, I suppose, a plan then how much we can put out now or what that will allow us with the second half of the year. And I suppose even when we look now, it's the likes of your clover, it's not fixing any nitrogen, so hence why we can get some chemical in. The likes of mineralisation from soil, it's quite slow now, starting off coming again out of your cold soil temperatures.
Yeah.
So it's really now we should be prioritising that small amount of N just to kick it off and rely on these other tools, say in the later half of the year. And then with the P applications again, it's all back to your NMP allowances and doing it on your nutrient management plan. And I suppose starting off in February, there was good conditions there for getting slurry out. Farmers got P and K and N on some of the grazing ground. But again, the nutrient management plan will allow you to tailor that to, say, with how much is physically or feasible to put out in terms of looking at its P and K value, because that's where a lot of the value in your slurry is coming from. And I suppose we want to make sure that we're not robbing Peter to pay Paul, in the sense that we're putting it out now for its own
Or to
value.
rob Peter, in fairness, lads.
You won't rob him.
You might sound like them from Cavan, but I'm not.
Good answer, Peter. Well, I suppose something we often get a lot of questions on. Is it worth my while actually putting out that little bit of early nitrogen? But if you were to go back on some chocolate studies, there is proof there that putting out early nitrogen for every kilo that you apply, it grows about 10 to 15 kilos on the back of it.
Yeah.
And there is very, very strong links there to early nitrogen having a correlation with the total, I suppose, milk solids delivered in the end of the year, because you get a healthier plant that's going to regrow faster, and it's going to have access to more nutrients, which is going to have benefits, I suppose, in terms of animal nutrition there as well. So look, I suppose for anyone out there that's actually wondering, should I put out that early nitrogen or shouldn't I? Definitely anywhere that hasn't got slurry this spring, really, really important that some early nitrogen goes out. But as Peter was saying there, soil temperatures are cold at the minute there. We need that little bit of nitrogen in solution in the soil there, not to grow a pile of grass in front of the cows now at the minute. Really at the moment we're talking about clearing the decks in front of the cows at the moment there. For that second round, that's where people get caught in. Really, really important. And I don't know, like Peter, you might just tell us, like, just for anyone listening out there that actually doesn't 100% know maybe what the pea is doing, like, what is the pea actually doing in the plant?
Yeah, well, I suppose the pea is really root development and tillering.
Yep.
And if we look at the last couple of months gone by, there's been very little of that happening. So we're putting it into the soil now. You're really teeing up the plant for the year to come along, and we're depending on them roots to go and scavenge the nutrients from the soil. Most farmers now, let's realistically, have a small pea allowance that they can use.
Yes, yeah.
So there's not really much point in putting that on in the later half of the year, because developing it at that stage as such, you've missed the boat in terms of some nutrients there. The soil is playing catch up. So really that's why we're trying to target it early. Once them days are getting longer and there's more light, that the pea is there in the system ready to go.
Yep.
So kind of as a summary is kind of your end first, but then once you kind of get into that middle March period, depending on what part of the country you are, the pea should be in the system or fairly close there on it, to try and give it that kick on.
Yeah, and I suppose going back to your nutrient management plan, like, one of the key benefits of having one is you're able to identify which paddocks are low in P and low in K, so you can kind of target, whatever P allowance you have to the ones that need it. And then you have, other benefits, knowing your pHs, which soils to, enhance the pH of later in the year, so you're getting more out of your fertilisers that are going out in the long run,
Yeah, and I suppose something that we didn't even touch on there, sulphur applications.
Yeah.
I suppose it's something that wouldn't be thought of there maybe as first round, but certainly by our second round, we really need to be thinking about that sulphur application. Look, sulphur is something that's probably secondary thought, when we're applying nitrogen or phosphorus, but sulphur is really, really important for helping convert that nitrogen in an efficient way and improving the protein content in our grass. So, look, for anyone that's listening out there and wondering about sulphur, what it actually does, or how they should actually go about applying it, typically it goes on at a rate of about 10:1 with your nitrogen. So for every 10 units of nitrogen, you put on 1 unit of sulphur, and that's kind of spaced out over the course of the year. So, when we're doing nutrient management plans, generally what we try to encourage is, shot of sulphur in the spring, to get nitrogen working a little bit more efficiently, shot mid-season, shot coming into the back end, and that just spreads the load and keeps that nitrogen working quite well. But it's probably something that we should note when we're talking about NMP.
And to be fair, when you talk about sulphur was never really an issue. To heavy burning of fossil fuels, etc.
Exactly.
And it's kind of who's on the 30 leaf for ourselves, Clare Aspel, or Clare Costigan now with her married name, and she would have done a lot of work in her PhD on sulphur.
Yes.
There was a huge gap on that. It was going back to the 80s before anyone in Ireland had done anything on it, and it's such a key nutrient now that was overlooked because it was in our atmosphere, you know,
Yeah.
for bad reasons, but it was there.
It's extremely important nutrient for growing crops and efficiency and getting more value out of what we're actually putting out. It really has to go out. And crops, whether we're talking about, you know, a winter barley crop or we're talking about a grass crop, they really need that sulphur application. So it's something that we can't really forget about. It's often something that people get worried about as well, over applying it, and it's the same as anything, Jim. If you over apply anything, you can cause problems somewhere else. So little and often is kind of the way to do that, really. And Stephen might talk a little bit about, you know, the effect of sulphur later on crops, and maybe when we're looking at fertilizer selection, you know, but really important to keep in that conversation.
Just to show me age a small bit, maybe you were only a twinkle in Mum and Dad's eyes when the Euro was launched to replace the punt, right? There was a great ad on television, and it was, "What's a euro, Daddy?" Right? This young lad wondering what's a euro as we change currency. What's a nutrient management plan? And I won't call you Daddy, I'll call you Edward. What is a nutrient management plan?
You better not start calling me Daddy now, or we might have problems, Jim. So, like, a nutrient management plan is basically a program that shows us where to accurately allocate our nutrients in order to give us the best bounce in terms of the growth of our crops. So, look, soil sampling is a key part of that. If we don't soil sample, we can't put together a nutrient management plan because you're shooting in the dark. And that's we talked in length about that last week, really. Do you know? But I suppose the value of actually getting a nutrient management plan together is, do you know, we probably, on most farms, we have index 1 and 2 soils, and we have index 3s and 4 soils. By applying our nutrients a little bit more efficiency, so applying the P's and K's on those low indexing ground, we have the potential on most farms, whether that's a grass crop or whether it's a tillage crop, to actually improve the yield of what we're growing. And that doesn't just mean improve the yield, it means improve the quality of what we're growing. So better nutrient value, you know, better ability to recover after a time of stress. All of this is included. And I suppose, look, in order to do that, we have to have the soil samples, but a nutrient management plan basically looks at soil sample results, that identifies the problem, looks at lime status. That's a key part of any nutrient management program, and then nitrogen, phosphorus, potash, and sulfur applications. Really important. Like, you can dive deeper into it, and you know, the same as Clodagh will talk about minerals there later on. You know, it's probably a little bit bigger in the tillage industry, Stephen, where we start to look at we start to look at trace elements, magnesium, you know, manganese, all these different elements. You can dive that deep into it. Probably not done so much on grassland, but you know, on the tillage end of it, that's very mainstream.
Yeah, very important. Crops are such high offtake crops that it's comparable to silage, I suppose, but in grassland terms, for fellas that are maybe growing a small bit of corn along with their grassland, huge offtakes of P and K when you're taking crops away from the field and you're exporting them, so they have to be replaced. So nutrient management plan, making the best use of the nutrients, is so important. Incorporate manures is also very important, especially in front of the spring crops. There's an opportunity there as well now, coming up, to incorporate them into our nutrient management plans.
Yeah. I suppose even you're saying, I suppose in the past maybe like they mightn't have been looked at in detail as much as the tillage. Really, if we're to call a spade, there's no choice now. If we want to be able to, you know, I suppose maintain our grass growth to what we were when we had the flexibility of more nutrients, we're really going to have to implement it.
Yes.
You know, otherwise you will just see the yield not come back.
Yeah.
You know.
I suppose, like, you know, Clodagh, you're reviewing plans every day of the week. I suppose, how important is it that the likes of a nutrient management plan, it's kept simple?
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, even look the way the scale of farming has gone now as well. You know, you need to have a plan that, like, a monkey can come in and look at it and know how much nitrogen needs to go in on the grazing ground, or, you know, or how much slurry needs to go out at the start of the year. Like, it's so important that anyone can come along and see at what month of the year how much needs to go out, like what product needs to go out, how much of it needs to go out, and where it needs to go out, really. Like, and just to sum up the nutrient management plan as well, I suppose the overall aim of it is to make sure that farmers are putting out the right product at the right rate at the right time of the year and in the right place. You know.
really important. I think that those, if we can keep by those P rules, you know, and that's the way we need to look at a nutrient management program. You know, it's allowing us to accurately put out fertilizer where we're going to get the best bounce, and that's both our organic and our chemical, as Stephen was saying there. So really important, Jim. I suppose just on that, if anybody is wondering about their allowances, or actually wondering, you know, how can, geez, I might get use of a nutrient management program. I mean, all you need to do, it's a relatively simple process there. Get in touch with your local Grassland Agro advisor. We need to get a little bit of information off you in terms of your soil sample results, your land areas, stocking rates, and meal fed, etc. But it can be put together relatively easily, and it gives so much information that's quite simple to read. And I suppose on the back of that, the overall aim is to grow better quality and more grass with less fertiliser going forward. It might seem funny for a fertiliser company to be saying that, but it's the way the industry is going.
Exactly,
and nitrates are getting squeezed all of the time, so we really need to apply where we're going to get the best bang for our buck.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
I suppose as well, it gives the farmer security as well, that he's not going to go over his allowances. If he has the plan, you know, he can't go wrong.
It's a great confidence builder and safety net just to have that to
exactly.
fall back to.
Yeah.
Just to move on, then we're here on the 7th of March now. Look, there is a couple of cows moving around in fields, very few. The weather is so all over the place still at the minute, we're not too sure where we are. But what's our consideration now for first and second round?
Yeah, so look, there is animals out at the moment. Grazing conditions are dodgy in places now at the minute. Like, you know, they were quite decent. We got a few storms in January, and it's been raining on and off since then. You know, so look, I think the whole thing with trying to graze at the moment, we really need to be looking at trying to get in one grazing a day anyway. That needs to be our target. You know. So allocating grass is going to be really, really important. So look, if we like, Clodagh might talk a little bit about it later on, but like typically after calving, our dairy cow will start off with a dry matter intake of about, you know, maybe 11 kilos a day, and over the following 8 weeks, that's going to increase by about a kilo a week. You know, so we generally land about the 18-19 kilo mark, depending on the breed of the animal and size of the animal. So getting our grass allocations right is really, really important. And look, for anybody out there that's wondering about grass allocations, how much should I be actually allocating? There's a really, really good useful tool on Pasture Base.
Yes.
Pasture Base is free to use for everybody. It's a free download, but there's a calculator on that can be used to actually allocate grass. Really, really important. But I suppose, look, going back to what we should be doing, we should be aiming to try and get in one grazing a day, and we should probably be maybe refraining in the mornings from feeding an awful amount of silage. So around that 10 a.m. mark, animals have a good appetite. They get out, they eat their grass allocation, and then probably, you know, after about 3 hours they're coming back in the shed. So we're on off grazing really. We're trying to get through as much grass as efficiently as possible. And look, as we're getting all of this rain at the moment, southeast is not getting it too bad, but other parts of the country are getting a decent amount. Our grass utilisation will go down a bit. You know, we'll end up trampling a little bit in, but I think the big thing is, we did a lot of harm in the spring of 2024 in terms of poaching. We want to try and minimise the harm we're doing on farm. Look, you know, a little bit of mucking is acceptable. We don't want to be poaching fields, and that's a really, really important consideration. We want to go out, clean off what's on paddocks. Probably at the moment, when we don't have huge numbers of cows out, we want to be targeting kind of covers of 800 to 1,000. That's really what we're looking to do. We're trying to clean off those paddocks, I suppose waken the crop up after its dormancy from the winter, and hopefully now we'll as temperatures start increasing, grass will start moving. You know, and look, this ties back into, you know, the point that Peter and John were talking about early nitrogen. You know, we want to waken up that ground. We want to get that early nitrogen out, so we can have enough grass back on those first graze paddocks to start our second round, because the beginning of the second round is often where we start to get caught
Yes,
in,
yes,
you know.
yes, exactly.
So look, that's kind of what we need to be looking at the moment, on-off grazing, and trying to get out at least once a day with animals, you know. And look, the more grass we can get back into the diet, the earlier, cheaper it's going to be on farms, you know. It's cheapest farm feed, Jim.
Yes, exactly.
You know,
Good graze outs early always are a benefit when possible.
Exactly,
you know?
exactly.
But even like I suppose when we look at the customers or that, or some of the farmers we're dealing with, like you have the farmers on that scale, both sides of the scale. Some very much understands the benefits and will, by all means, they will try push on to get grass in. Farmers on the opposite side waiting on the ideal conditions. And I suppose we're not, you know, we completely get that, obviously, you know, the trafficability, and you have to, you know, different ends of the country, it may be practical to get out, it may be not, but it's about not waiting on the ideal everything, you know, that full week of good weather. It's about just getting them out, you know, in that in-between stage where you're passing, not doing significant damage, or, you know, obviously damaging the soil, because we don't want that, but by all means not waiting until everything's just 100% perfect, because I suppose you could leave yourself, I suppose, quite, what would you say, in a sort of a catch up period there. So if you have a lot of cows calved, you're expecting energy demands to be met off silage. It just can't be done unless you're putting in a significant amount of concentrate. Do you know? So it's about it's about getting that balance right, depending on where you are in the country. You know, not just waiting on absolutely everything to line up for you.
I suppose that shows the importance of actually getting out and walking the farm. Because if we don't get out and walk the farm, we don't know what the ground conditions are like.
Exactly.
And we won't know as well how to accurately allocate our grass, and I suppose allocate paddocks, you know, because we need to know what covers are on paddocks in order to target those 800 to 1,000 covers, like, you know. So that the value of that can't be understated. Get out, walk the farm, find out what's trafficable, and, you know, you might get out and get that one grazing a day then, you know. But like, that is a huge link to protein contents and butter fats, you know. By that early grass is a very, very good. Look, it can be variable depending on how much yellow matter is in it, but in terms of protein contents, you can't beat spring grass, like, you know.
And just to branch on, so go on, Peter, you go.
No, I was just going to say on the point that Ed was making on knowing your cover and measuring out, it can't be underestimated, the significance of that, because the last thing you want is, I know, unfortunately it's not the case we're in at the minute, but we're able to push on through the grazing, but the last thing you want to do is run out of a grass supply there mid-April, and next thing cows back in, going on to a silage diet. You know, it'll just knock your proteins way back, as I said. Like,
consistency is what we need. You know, that sort of it.
So you'd be better off, like,
consistency in an inconsistent world.
Good point, Jim. Good point.
You could branch on lovely to Clodagh. Mineral selection post carbon.
Perfect. Just one other thing I'll say there on what Peter was saying about, you know, look, farmers are concerned about doing a bit of damage. I was at a spring grass walk there last week in Askeaton, and we were kind of looking at how the farmers selected different paddocks for grazing. So grazing infrastructure came up as well. So they actually had a very useful tool in the handout they had. So they kind of broke it into 4 different categories. So let's say our first category was your drier fields that have good grazing infrastructure. And like your category 4 then was your kind of more wetter fields that you might leave off for another while. But I suppose a few things that were brought up as well in the group was back fencing cows, you know, using your spur roadways if you're concerned about damage, and to use fields that have maybe multiple access points to it as well. So look, there is ways around it as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good point. Very good point.
So yeah, minerals. So look, I suppose after calving, cows do go through a huge metabolic stress. Like, when you think about it, they've gone through a period of 2 months there in the dry period where they haven't been producing milk. They're increasing volumes of milk now up towards their peak. Their feed intake has been impacted due to the fact they've been heavy in calf over the last couple of months. And look, like, they're in recovery as well after producing that calf, and they have to go back and calf again, all within a very short space of time. So this is where our minerals come into play to help get the cow through this period. So I'm going to talk about 3 key minerals after calving. So your calcium, your phosphorus, and your magnesium. So your calcium, look, a cow loses a lot of calcium, especially in the first couple of days after calving through their milk. And this calcium is very important for muscle function. So I suppose not to forget, the uterus is a muscle, and that's after going through a very stressful period. So that needs time to recover as well. And look, calcium is very important for the likes of to reduce milk fever on farm. So if cows are coming up to calving and I suppose they don't have adequate amounts of calcium in their body, the muscles are weakened, so can result in weak contractions, slow recovery of the calf, and it can lead to the likes of retained placenta as well, which will go on to affect the cow at breeding time as well. And just getting back to your milk fever, cows can go down after calving, and look, you know yourself, we're at the end of February now, farmers have a lot of cows calved. The last thing you want is cows going down with milk fever. So I suppose what I'd be kind of saying to farmers as well, coming up to calving, to identify those repeat offenders from last year that went down with milk fever. Keep an eye on cows that might be maybe a bit over conditioned, your high yielding cows, and look, not to forget about your older cows as well. They need that little bit of extra calcium coming up to calving as well, for fear that they might go down. And just as well with those older cows, subclinical milk fever actually affects up to 50% of older cows in a herd, so that's a fairly substantial figure. And just to put it into perspective in terms of the cost of milk fever on farm, like it can be anywhere in between 250 to 400 euros per case, and like that's including your loss of milk, your vet bills, like in very extreme cases you might end up culling the cow in the herd. So look, that's just a bit on calcium there. So your phosphorus then is very important for your energy metabolism, your recovery of your cow after calving, and your fertility as well. So just in terms of your energy, so as I said, look, cows go through a very stressful period at the start. They need that little bit more energy to produce high volumes of milk and high volumes of solids. Phosphorus is very important for your fertility as well, for your production of progesterone, which is important to bring cows back cycling as well after calving. And your recovery then as well, so phosphorus will help with the recovery of tissue cells. It'll help restore that bank of energy, and it'll also help the immunity of the cow as well. So you have your your magnesium as well. So magnesium sometimes can be maybe sometimes overlooked on farm. It's very important that cows have enough magnesium in their diet to be able to mobilise that calcium. So basically, if you don't have magnesium in the diet, calcium can't do its job properly. And look, another thing to note as well, especially in an Irish spring grass system, sometimes grass can be quite high in potassium. So if you have high levels of potassium, it can lock up calcium within the cow, or magnesium, sorry. So you need to make sure that cows are supplemented with that magnesium coming up to calving to prevent the likes of milk or grass tetany and things like that.
I suppose really important as well, we talked about grazing a couple of minutes ago, right? And we talked about low soil temperatures. It's not particularly warm outside.
No.
I was driving down here. I was driving down here this morning. There was saying 4 degrees in the car. Yeah. But if you have cold temperatures as well, magnesium not very available in cold temperatures. And if we do have paddocks that might have got an early application of slurry, we might have cold temperatures acting on our magnesium. But then we might also have potash acting on our magnesium, and that's why it's really, really important that we keep that magnesium in the diet post-calving, I suppose, for that grass tetany issue. And this is a risk period, for grass tetany, while those temperatures are cold, no more than the back end. But that's a really, really good point there. And it probably is something that's overlooked a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. And look, one thing I'll say as well with your minerals, especially your pre-calving minerals, you can't afford to skimp on them. I went through the costs of milk fever on farm, it's 200 to 400 euro per case. So look, we're always looking to drive on production, drive on milk solids, drive on milk yields. That's going to have offtakes on the cow as well in terms of their minerals. So it's like going into a field and taking 3 cuts of silage. There's going to be offtakes of P&K. They have to be replaced.
It's even the setbacks. It's with the financial element, but the setbacks in terms of how that will impact on breeding, and on the system we're running, it's a full package, really, isn't it?
It's all stress.
Yeah.
It's all stress, so that's to animal, but also as we can't underestimate the impact that has on farmers. Farmers are up to their eyeballs calving cows at the moment, and nobody wants to be getting problems, and milk fever is a big problem. adds a lot of stress. A lot of the time we have to get the vet involved as well, and then I can't remember exactly what the figure is, but if a cow gets milk fever once, I think they're 3 or 4 times more likely to get milk fever again. In following years. So we really can't afford to take our eye off the ball. On that end of it. So like I suppose in that post calving period, where they are in that 8 weeks where they actually can't take in enough energy to meet their requirements. Feeding a post-calving mineral is so important, whether that's copper or calcium for production. Copper is something we didn't mention there. Copper is really, really important. It does very, very similar. It does very, very similar things as phosphorus, in terms of our energy metabolism, but we have to keep the minerals into these animals if we want to get them to reach that peak, but also go back in calf, and that's the getting them back in calf is the key to unlocking the whole next year's lactation.
Look, just in terms of your cow going into a negative energy balance, or if they have an imbalance in minerals, the first thing that's going to be affected post calving is their fertility, and if you're that's going to have a huge economic impact on the farmer if the cow doesn't go back in calf, or she's delayed going back in calf. So I suppose, look, that just brings me on to what is negative energy balance. So as Ed was saying, cows, if they can consume enough to meet the energy demands of milk production, she goes into that negative energy balance. So, and she starts feeding off her, I suppose, fat reserves to make up for that shortfall. So I suppose just in terms of a few signs to look out for if a cow is in negative energy balance, she might reduce her body condition score. She might drop in milk yields. Her milk solids could be affected. And if you have cows that have calved down in early February, maybe the end of January, it's no harm to keep an eye on them to see if they're coming back bulling as well, and make note of cows that maybe aren't coming back bulling, that at least you can do something about it now instead of looking at it at the end of April, the start of May, when you're going breeding and there's nothing you can do about it then.
100%.
And I think even it ties all back into as well in terms of the feed, not to be going back on the grass piece or anything, but if we're not getting that early spring grass, I know I was touching on it earlier, but it's so valuable. I suppose we're looking at an UFL on an energy basis, it's not far off what your kilo concentrate's going to give you. Whereas if if we're not getting, say, some of that in the springtime, and depending solely on the silage diet, you're knocked back about maybe 15-20% of the energy value on a per kilo basis straight away. It has to be all ferried in from concentrate, and if the decision's there is not to bring that in, you're into exactly what you're saying. The negative energy balance is going to be significant. You're going to lose more than that, half a body condition score, and ultimately reproduction, performance. Wouldn't have just completely gone by the wayside.
There's such a circular knock-on effect through all the components.
And I think that's a key thing too. Why I know some people would be, why are we always going on about getting the cows out for that couple hours grazing that Ed was saying? It's for that reason. From a forage basis, your grass is the one that there's no silage or forage that's going to match it. And that's really it. It's what that 3 or 4 hours of a graze and getting that maybe 6 kilos, 7 kilos of dry matter in. It's not going to be matched in the silage, even if you're at good quality silage. The majority of silage that's there, if a farmer would even say 74 DMD silage, mid 70s, it's probably, we would class that as good. But it's still not going to be enough. So it's just about putting, it's all, if you like, as you say, one circle, it's all in sync together.
Look, I think we're after going through a lot of information there, I suppose, but look, I think it's about doing simple things. Take small steps, implement, if some of these things are new, implement small pieces, they're all going to make slight improvements on how animals are performing, or how our grassland actually performs. I suppose just on the mineral end of things, we have options in terms of the minerals. The fertilizer is not only what we do, and probably I say it would probably be fair to say, Jim, probably that post-calving mineral, that phosphlock that we do, would probably be the biggest mineral out of all of them that we actually do. But just having the likes of the phosphlock in front of animals there and making it available to them, I suppose, is really, really important. The animal will tell you themselves how much they need.
That's the
you know,
beauty of it. Yeah.
Really, because it has that sodium base. The animal can only take in so much sodium. So if they need it, they'll go for it. If they don't, they'll leave it alone. And I think that's a really powerful measure as to how much the animal actually requires this time of the year. Do you know?
That's Lunio Vital Phos. I will say that a second time. Lunio Vital Phos. That's a massive mineral supplementation block of ours that is just superb, as you say. It's feed the need, not the greed,
Exactly.
you know.
Exactly.
And they manage themselves. I think it could be an idea now. We'll just branch on to John Brennan here. I saw him yawn. He feels like, you know, he's not going to ask me a question. Ed turned his back on him there. He's like, you know, obviously Ed feels that John has more value, so he just turned his back on him there.
If you had to give us all the coffee, Jim, one with that problem.
Yeah, we have to pass it over.
Yeah, we'll have to get on to the sponsors for
Mr. Linden Food and Grocery did not have the budget to stretch to 6 coffees. We're not that good. But Johnny, maintaining hygiene standards, especially post-calving.
Yeah. Massive.
Where are we?
Massive area again. Lots to talk about in this space as well. I suppose, you know, a cow after calving is at a very vulnerable stage of picking up infection, as well as the calf itself. So maintaining hygiene standards at a high level is vitally important. Especially, I suppose, as we get towards the end of calving, we're getting tired. It's important to maintain, you know, the level of detail and the level of cleanliness around the shed. I suppose, firstly, like, you know, the cow itself, you don't want her to be on the back foot, because the next stage for her is to be preparing her for breeding. So any setback is going to delay things there and, you know, have an effect on that. You don't want any uterine infections setting in, mastitis as well in terms of milk quality. You know, you want to kind of have your somatic cell counts as low as you can, you know.
Yeah.
And then the calf as well, also very vulnerable. You know, you want to have kind of simple things clean, like your calving jack, you want fresh bedding down, you know, you want your hygiene, your disinfectant products, your iodine used in the navel, all these simple things that are easy to forget when you're under pressure, and just to kind of maintain those standards. And I suppose overall, from a farm biosecurity point of view, you know, you want to kind of minimise infection, minimise spread. You know, Clodagh talked about the figures there, like, you know, you want to cut down your vet bills, which is vitally important, I suppose, in terms of how a farm performs economically as well. But yeah, it's a huge space, and preventing infection is definitely massive, you know.
And probably with that, like, I suppose when we're talking about prevention, like the point we're at now, but if you reverse maybe 2, 3, 4 months ago when we were drying off, you know, to measure, I suppose, our hygiene standards back then, I suppose it's important to get that early milk recording and not waiting for the whole hair to be calved down or wait until May.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to capture, say, data on how well if you're looking at selective dry cow therapy, how effective that was, you know, you really want to be getting your milk recording in within that probably for 45 days, 60 days, you know, to try and benchmark. And plus, it's giving you a full year's data, I suppose. You know, that you're not come the end of the season in 2025, we're not saying, oh well, this cow was, you know, she was on, let's say, 100,000 cell count. But, you know, what happened for the first maybe 60, 80?
Yes.
She was one of your early calvers. So it just ties into the point, even though it's hygiene standards now, we can capture, you know, with the milk recording, hygiene standards in the previous period, and how we can learn from that, you know, in the subsequent season. Like.
100%.
Yeah, exactly. Look, it's a really good point there that both John and Peter are after bringing up there. Like, it's something that we can't afford to let slip. At this time of the year, because, as I said, we talked about milk fever and grass tetany earlier on. They're all stressors. Do you know, if we have infection on farm as well, that's going to be a massive stress, whether that's the cow or whether that's the calf. And if we have stress, it's going to affect performance. Do you know, that sort of way? So something that we can't afford really to take our eye off the ball now at the moment there, Jim. I know there's an awful amount to be managing on farm now at the minute there, but I suppose, do you know, if we can keep doing the simple things right, keep our hygiene plan in place, keep to our nutrient management plan, do you know, all of these things are going to be of benefit to profitability in the end of the day, you know.
And that planning an organisation, managing all them things out, it avoids the bigger chaos when shit hits the fan.
Yeah,
you know, because when things do go wrong, that is a different problem. It's a new stress, and there's way more pressures that come in. So it's just maintain. And sometimes hygiene does get pushed down when we're looking. We might get a bit more focused on, you know, getting cows out, getting cows in, grazing, getting fertiliser sprayed, and you know, sometimes they're easier jobs to do because there's a big impact and a big visual, and you know, we skip a bit of cleaning inside in the parlour or whatever.
And people are working big hours. People are working big hours at the moment. It can't be underestimated. You know, it can't be understated the amount of hours that farmers are actually working at the moment, and you know, the stress that puts on the whole system and the whole family, I suppose, around the farm at home. Like, so, you know, the better the routine we can get into, I suppose the better it's going to be while we're in this busy period. And hopefully that work will start to decrease a little bit, and people will start getting more sleep. Because that's a big thing, like, you know. So, you know, the last thing what I'd say to anyone that's listening out here is just, you know, stay safe on farm as well at the moment, because this is a very, very stressful time. You know.
Exactly.
And look, I suppose, Stephen, that probably leads into your end of things. It's a very, very stressful time on livestock farms at the minute there, but we're running into a very, very busy time of the year for spring crops as well, and for getting fertiliser on winter crops and that end of and stuff. So I don't know, what do you see going on out there at the moment, and what way are crops looking at the minute?
Yeah, definitely coming into a very busy time, I suppose, in terms of what way crops are looking. We obviously had a kind enough back end to 2024, so that gave a bit of a window to get winter crops sown, and nearly more importantly, there was a bit of kind weather after sown that allowed the crops to get established. So I'd say for the most part, full yield potential is there for winter crops. Just a side note, I suppose, because of the trauma of the 2 seasons previous, some farmers did start sowing a bit earlier in the autumn time, and because of that we're seeing a few forward crops around the country there now, which looks not the end of the world. They just have to be managed accordingly. So that's in terms of fertiliser, growth regulator and fungicides, because those early crops will have higher disease pressure. In terms of fertilisation now coming into the spring and the big workload we have coming up, I suppose oilseed rape is the priority. So that's your end rate for oilseed rape isn't set every year. It's you judge it based on your green area index. That's the amount of vegetation per unit area. So farmers need to go out and look at crops, particularly oilseed rape. You can't leave it all to the agronomist. But as I say about oilseed rape, early sown crops, like crops sown in August, and particularly crops that got a bit of manure, they're probably looking stronger now. They're going to have a stronger green area index in comparison to crops sown maybe September that might have got grazed by pigeons. So then back to the crops that were sown later, probably needed a bit of nitrogen in February, and a lot of farmers did get out and get nitrogen on them crops. I know there was a few spells of rain, maybe some farmers couldn't travel, but definitely at this stage now, oilseed rape backwards oilseed rape should have got its first shot at nitrogen, and even the bare looking crops that probably need their first application of nitrogen soon, second week of March perhaps. In terms of winter barley, winter barley it's a sink limited crop. That means the yield is dictated by the amount of grain sites it has to fill. So to maximise the amount of grain sites, we need to maximise the amount of tillers that will go on to produce ears. So the best way to do this is early season management of nitrogen. You'll often see when you're driving through the country, crops of winter barley going yellow in February. So a lot of farmers did get out with maybe 20-30 units of nitrogen just to retain them tillers. And again, if farmers haven't got out yet, it's definitely a priority list now. Get that first application of nitrogen on winter barley. In terms of winter wheat and oats, not as much of a panic on nitrogen. They're looking strong, a lot of strong crops of wheat and oats around the country. Still we're coming up to the first application timing for wheat and oats, going up to growth stage 30. Depending what part of the country you're in. If you're down Cork, Wexford, that's obviously going to come sooner than the likes of later areas, Meath, County Dublin. So that's probably a roundup of the winter crops. In terms of spring crops, then, suppose there's been some sowing of spring beans already. I've seen on social media a few beans going in February in obviously drier parts of the country. going in with a via strip till, which is a good method of getting them in. Just in terms of nutrients, I suppose, and pH, beans do like a high pH. If you haven't sown your beans yet, might be your last opportunity just to get lime out, do pH up around 6.8 or 7.
Yeah.
In terms of P and K for beans don't like low index soil, so ideally you'd be picking fields that are index 3 and 4, but if you are sowing in lower index soils, definitely get the fertiliser into the seedbed. In terms of spring cereals, then look, it's really early enough days yet, but I suppose it's a good opportunity now to be making sure you have your nutrient management plan in place, have your fertiliser ready to go. You're probably putting an NPK compound into the seedbed. In terms of malt and barley, you're looking to get a bit of nitrogen in early, keep proteins right. And then beaten maize is a while away yet, but I suppose it'll be last opportunity just to get soil tests done if they haven't been done, just to give labs time to get results back, and again get lime out ahead of them crops too. They like high pHs as well.
Yeah, I suppose we're in March now. They won't be long about coming around either. You touched on the nutrient management in the stuff. I suppose just in your own experience, even from your own farm at home, has it been difficult to get your head around the P allowances and the N allowances for crops? Like, and I suppose where would you normally go if you were looking for what you're allowed to spread? And I suppose how important is it actually to take those soil samples and get a nutrient management plan put together? You know, whether it's grassland or on the tillage into things.
Absolutely, I'm seeing like some of the best farmers in the country. They're still doing a lot of thinking about these nutrient management plans. It's new to a lot of people, but I suppose it's about starting with the basics. Get your soil tests. I'll reiterate what I said in the last podcast. If your soil test is over 4 years of age, it's out of date.
Yep.
You've no P allowance there. I suppose specialist tillage farmers need to be mindful of imports of manures as well.
Yep.
There's P coming in there as well that has to be accounted for. So P allowances are based on your indexes of your soil and expected yields of the crops. So if you look back at your last 3 years, your highest yields, if it's over the base yield according to regulations, it could give you a higher P allowance.
Yep.
So that's all incorporated into a nutrient management plan. And in terms of K, I suppose it's to do with off-takes. It's your expected crop yield. You need to replace them big off-takes, and if indexes are low, you want to be building up K levels as well, because it's going to increase nitrogen use efficiency. But yeah, it's something that's really, really important, no matter whether you're in a grassland farm or a tillage situation. Like, you know, the allowances are only going to get tighter for every farmer. It's not just the grassland farmer. It's also proven quite difficult with the tillage end of things. So just if anyone is you know, unsure out there, same as I said earlier on, don't be afraid to give us a shout. You know, we can help with the allowances. We can go through yields, and we can try and find what best works for your crops based off of what you've been growing for the last few years. Like, you know, and you know, in fairness to Stephen there, Stephen is a great asset to the team. He's great knowledge. Like, in fairness, so look, if anyone is unsure out there, just get in touch with us, and we'll be able to give you a hand with your allowances going forward.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, Clodagh, the last date you said, the 21st of September 2021.
Yeah.
If a soil sample predates that, it's null and void.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so just when you're going back through your files, it's always worth double checking if you think you have your samples. Because look, these years do go fast.
Yeah.
You know, and we can miss out. And next thing, you're a 42-year-old guy that's got a receding hairline you're trying to hold forward. So time goes fast around here. You know.
Maybe you're a fountain, Jim.
But I'll take that. Stephen, Clodagh, Peter, Edward, John, thanks very much. Any final thoughts, statements?
I suppose just take it handy on farm. Like, look, if you're ever in bother, give us a ring. Like, look, we went through a lot there. It's a lot to keep in your head, you know, at a busy time of the year. But look, take every day as it comes.
I think even with that, like, as you said, Clodagh, we went through a lot of stuff. Like, obviously, you know, in parts of the country, you know, there will be earlier farms, there will be later farms, and it's just about tailoring it to each individual farm. You know, like, if you have a heavy farm, fair enough, you might only get a proportion to ground,
Yeah,
etc. So, just as I say, what could, if there is any, what would you say, assistance needed on that in terms of, as Ed said already, NPK, reach out. There's no issues there.
Farm smart, farm safe.
How dare you steal my line?
Like that, I came up with that myself.
You would be sacked.
That's going to be cut once the editing is done. Don't worry.
My one decent line. Carry on, John. I'd like to apologise about Edward there.
Yeah, I suppose just going back to farm safety, calving is a dangerous time of year. Cows are dangerous creatures, especially around calving, so just be careful out there, especially as you get tired, don't be taking any shortcuts, just be careful.
Yeah. What about you, Stephen? Any
Similar again, look back to last spring, a lot of sound didn't start until 20th of April, and we got great yields of spring barley, so there's no point killing ourselves, do a decent day's work, but don't be overdoing it.
Yeah, exactly. Give yourself that breakaway time as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Now to do it properly. Mind yourselves out there. Farm smart, farm safe.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Sod Pod. We hope you enjoyed it. To find out more, head over to www.grasslandagro.ie or check out our social channels: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn and YouTube. That's all for this episode. See you next time.